Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of September, and welcome to this training session on the compliance director role. So the good old SMF16 role, as we've come to know and love it. So this particular session is designed for those of you who are currently enrolled by way of a refresher. And also, I know there are some people online who are going to be moving into this role, so prospective SMF16s. So some information that I think you will find useful as you migrate over into your new role. The session is scheduled to last for an hour. So without any further ado, let's get underway and start to think about what we're going to be covering this morning together. So in terms of some learning objectives then, just going to initially walk you through kind of the background to the senior managers regime and some of the expectations that come with it from the FCA. And in terms of, because of those expectations, the key elements of the role that we kind of need to frame in our statement of responsibilities and statement of accountabilities. Having done that, we'll move into more of the mechanics of the role, really. Share with you something called an annual compliance calendar as a suggestion of something to consider. I'll share with you some resources that are available from IFAC. It's a compliance monitoring program that you can use in conjunction with that. And then we'll just broaden things off slightly and talk to some of the FCA expectations around how businesses are structured, particularly from an audit and governance point of view, compliance point of view. And before we drop back down into maybe some thought starters in terms of your own internal audit processes. And then, as I say, for those prospective SMF16s who are moving into role, just some background around the accreditation process and the dreaded Form A that needs to be filled in for the FCA. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing together this morning. Let's get underway then. So as I said, first of all, we're just going to revisit the context of the senior managers and certification regime. As you know, it's been with us for a few years now. I'm very, very astute by the regulator, this one, because it wanted to position firms, not itself, as being responsible for compliance with its own kind of principles, handbook, regulations, and broader statutory legislative requirements in a way that it could just have an oversight role. It was introduced about a decade ago now, actually, into the big insurers and banks. We were kind of the last to come under the auspices of that regime. And I guess we're all feeling much more familiar and au fait with it now. Particularly what it did is it introduced this so-called duty of responsibility. And the punchline to that is if a firm breaches any FCA requirements, then the SMF who's responsible for the breach can actually be held individually accountable. So it's this regime is a way of the FCA kind of reaching through from their supervisory high point and holding individuals within firms to account. As a result, what is required is that every SMF role actually has to have the documented statement of responsibilities, which is much more than a job description. This is actually articulating what the roles and responsibilities, in particular the prescribed responsibilities, are for the role that this role holder is accountable for. Okay, and if again, for those of you who are transitioning to role, for those of you who haven't read it for a while, that there's a good guide to the senior managers and certification regime available from the FCA. And again, like everything, if you haven't looked at it in a while, it stands another read just to refresh our knowledge and understanding. So the senior management regime, basically, as you know, as its name would suggest, applies to senior managers in the business, those individuals who have got, are influencers, controllers of the business. And as we know from the other work we do together, the other training, increasingly the FCA are taking an interest in leadership and culture within a business, particularly from the work I've been doing on consumer duty and making sure we get successful implementation of that. Culture is kind of central to everything that we do, and something that continues to be of interest to them. Therefore, it becomes it's no surprise that when we look at these senior management function roles, these are kind of the leadership team within the business, whether you are an incorporated business with chief executives or whether you work on a partnership basis, and dependent on the size of your business, whether or not you've got executive directors and chair people coming in to hold the board to account. But as we can see here, over and above the governing functions, two roles were picked out as being key critical to the regulatory regime. The first one of which we're spending the next hour talking about, which is the SMF16 role, which, as we know, is all about the compliance oversight, absolutely key critical from a regulatory perspective, as well as the SMF17 role, which is the gold money laundering reporting officer. And as you know, it may be that you are not just solely focusing on SMF16. It may be you've got combined responsibilities, and that's allowed, fine, under the regime. And maybe you've got a combined role because there is some overlap and synergies between 16 and 17. Now, whether you're existing in role or whether you're coming to it for the first time, I do recommend that you take a look at a document that's available on the FCA website. It first came out last year. It was updated at the tail end of last year. The reason I kind of advocate and recommend this is it actually spells out the FCA's expectations for some of the knowledge, skills, and experience that people coming into these roles and who are holding these roles should have. Basically, they produced a guidance for the assessment of candidates into this role. So I think that's really good that we understand what it is, the key qualities the FCA are looking for, because obviously the more information we have, the more informed we are, the better it is we're able to discharge our role and obviously stay within the parameters that the FCA are expecting. Now, I've already looked through that document on your behalf. I'm not saying I still recommend that you read it, but in terms of some of the key information, I pulled out four, I think, relatively key points, really. The first of which was that the expectation is that you must continue to invest in your education and training. So yes, if you're coming in new to role, you'll have a formalised induction programme, no doubt. But from a continuing professional development point of view, always to be taking steps through internal routes such as this or external routes to demonstrate that you're keeping up to date with market movements and getting that documented. So congratulations, by the way, for coming on the course this morning, because that's a great way to evidence that you're taking this seriously. The other thing from an experience point of view, is the need to demonstrate that you've got sufficient knowledge and experience to making the right calls around compliance for the business. And, and that would be about building up a proven track record of success, carrying out successful implementations and audits in the compliance space, and a steady hand on the tiller, but taking corrective actions where necessary to demonstrate that. As you know, the FCA are quite happy that you get assistance with compliance issues from external providers. And I know a lot of firms actually do that. And that's absolutely fine. But in the FCA's view, it doesn't actually reduce the internal competence required within the firm, because you need to know what the external consultancies providers are actually telling you, and understand that and hold them to account and manage them. And of course, as you know, key critical, particularly in the SMF roles, is you can't delegate away your accountability. So whilst you might delegate some responsibility away, the accountability still rests very squarely on your shoulders. And the fourth one, and I thought this was a particularly pertinent point, given my experience working with firms where it's always busy. You know, it's not a case of peaks and troughs, it's just how high the peaks are. And particularly for those of you who are doing this either not as a full-time role and you're combining it with other roles as well. So it's effectively on a part-time basis. And again, the requirements of the SMF regime are that you must demonstrate, you must be in a position to evidence that the time you're spending on these compliance activities in this SMF16 role is both proportionate and sufficient to get the job done. So we're not cutting corners or not sufficiently investing our time, energy and resources into it. So in terms of the role itself, as we all know, this is about having compliant oversight for the business as well as responsibility. So the SMF16 role stands squarely there to fulfill the role of the compliance officer for the regulatory firm as required by the senior managers regime and the SMF and the FCA handbook. Yeah. As I've already said, there's no problem in combining this role with other senior management function roles. And I know a lot of firms operate on that business from an efficiency and effectiveness point of view. And that's absolutely fine. And as you know, as part of this regime, this is about you standing accountable for regulation within the firm and to showing adherence to the regulation of the firm. So you stand as the accountable individual carrying regulatory responsibility for the firm. So I think that enables you to be quite kind of demanding of your colleagues, whether they're fellow partners or co-directors or whatever, to say that, you know, this role carries this responsibility, therefore you sort of demand resources, time, access, and for them to take all issues, compliance seriously and respond to things like your audits and tweaks. And building on that point, there's an expectation that you are going to be reporting back either to the board or to your co-partners, at least on an annual basis, about how well you're doing, almost like a scorecard, if you like, off the back of your audit in terms of how we're faring against our own internal expectations about the expectations of our regulator that are set out in the handbook in terms of our compliance performance. So I've been talking about some of the key areas of responsibility. As just to reiterate, if you've not got the message already, you are accountable to the FCA. And in a nutshell, you're there basically, and this is key. It's a word we always are using with the FCA. It's about the ability to evidence ongoing compliance. So if it's not able to be evidenced in the world of the FCA, then it hasn't happened and it doesn't exist. So we need to think about how we're going to capture that and to demonstrate to somebody's satisfaction that we've got the evidence. The other thing is, you know, not just be reactive, it's about being proactive. So we're evidencing ongoing compliance by proactively taking steps to prevent breaches. You know, from time to time, maybe it's almost inevitable that there'll be some sort of breach that's unforeseen, unintended, obviously, beyond our control. And then we're going to get on, obviously, and report it. But have we done everything we can proactively to prevent that situation arising? And are we, on a broader perspective, taking all reasonable steps, not only to protect the firm, but given the responsibilities now on us for under consumer duty, to demonstrate that we're proactively protecting clients? Remember the requirements now in terms of communication, staying closer to clients to ensure they are going to achieve the financial objectives that we're working on together. So can we demonstrate that we're proactively protecting clients and protecting the quality of their financial planning against the objectives they've articulated to us, and taking corrective action where necessary. So that has never been more important. You know, as are the systems and controls we have in place. Yeah. Now I know a lot of us have got kind of well-oiled kind of systems and controls, but as I've just said from Consumer Duty, they're kind of always kind of work in progress, aren't they? They remind me a little bit of that Forth Road Bridge up in Scotland. As soon as they've finished painting one end, they have to go back and start painting the other. And it feels a little bit like that in the world of compliance, because we always have to be restless in terms of amending our controls, amending our systems and processes to take account of the inevitable changes, not least the big change through Consumer Duty that happened 23rd of July. Again, if you've been in role for a while or coming new to role, some good further information available in this policy statement. It's been out since 2018. It's not been updated since, but this was the final guidance that was issued in terms of the duty of responsibility for regulated firms. What it has in there, actually, which is why I'm recommending it to you, there's a great section in there specifically for SMF16s that defines, from the FCA's point of view, reasonable actions. So it's where firms have potentially been in breach, or there's been a breakdown in systems and controls, and we've not been able to protect firm and or clients. Therefore, this is what they're saying. Oh, well, actually, we can, our independent adjudication and judgment is that this set of actions would have actually been reasonable. If you fell short of that, then this is where we're going to take action. And it sort of describes also the action it's taken, both against individuals and also firms, because it didn't see a pathway through to its definition of reasonableness of judgment. So again, if you haven't done so in a while, I heartily recommend 10 minutes to one side as part of your wearing your SMF16 hat, time well invested. And then again, for those of you who need to frame your statement of responsibilities and yet to do so, for those of you who've already got them, don't fall into the trap of writing them out once and just leaving them set in kind of aspect. Always look to refresh them where necessary. I'm not going to go into a comprehensive kind of list, but just to give you some thought starters, really, of the very minimum that should be in your statement of responsibilities. Of course, if I were doing the role, I would make it my mission to ensure that not only did I own the overall risk framework within which compliance activities sit, but also I was the key individual who was defining that, including, making sure that it's work in progress. So I'm forever working on the maintenance and ongoing development of it. Yeah. However, be careful what you put in these statements, because this is what you're going to be held to account for. Yeah. Obviously, you need to be telling the regulator that you have got oversight of the compliance function. But again, my provocation to you is to make sure that you absolutely have, and you've got access to the resources you need in a timely fashion if you suddenly need to get on and do something from a compliance perspective. Of course, building on that, you're going to be responsible for the firm's compliance performance and the SMF16 responsibilities as defined under the certification regime. And that's where those documents and reading I've referenced you to actually come in handy to inform that. You don't have to, but my experience is that very often within firms, the SMF16 either owns the complaints process or is very closely associated with it, either from a management or working closely in collaboration together. And I think, complaints and compliance kind of are very much aligned. It's a great early warning trigger for things that might be astray in systems and processes. So some way, shape or form, I think you've got to show a propensity to be, if you're not managing it, to be close to it. And again, they would expect to see not only are you reporting to the firm or co-partners, but you are the one in terms of the senior leadership team who is taking on that responsibility and insisting that the firm meet the regulations and requirements of the FCA handbook and other compliance responsibilities. The other thing as well is that this shouldn't just be something that you look down into from a firm perspective. There's an expectation that you'll take more of a helicopter view as well. This is why I think they pick out training as being one of the key elements they're expecting to see when you assess people into role, and your understanding of the more holistic compliance space across the market, across the sector, because that obviously will inform your approach to compliance for your specific firm. And there is a great document that you can actually access that helps give you a more of a wider perspective from the FCA's point of view. It's this regulatory initiative grid. The latest one I have available is actually from February of this year, and you can see from the illustration there all the people who contribute into it. But what it's very useful for, because it's published by this forum, is it gives us planned regulatory activities out on a 24-month basis, and that's rolling. So we get a great early sighter of things that are muted and planned from a compliance perspective coming down the track at us. So we would have seen consumer duty starting to come at us from this. Yeah, it is updated every 6 months. Now, I did check yesterday because it's due to be updated any time now, but the latest edition isn't posted online yet. It is due because we've just gone the 6 month period. So I'm watching that. I've got a diary note to check again next week to try and get the latest copy of that. You might like to do likewise, because in your role, it's going to help you not only understand, but also plan for potential regulatory change and, and lobby if necessary. So if you've never seen the document before, but I'll just share it with you. This is what I pulled out from the grid. You see, a lot of it doesn't actually affect us because it's a forum, but there are some specific pieces in here where we can say, okay, that is likely to be something that we will need to deal with. So, as you know, they've consulted on doing a more streamlined regime for stocks and shares ISAs, and we are awaiting publication of that final guidance. Consumer duty, we've talked about it a lot. We'll continue to talk about it. We would have seen this coming down the runway at us, ready for that implementation. And let's not forget, it's not over. We've got the closed products piece coming to be implemented in just under a year's time. And they've already told us that they plan on doing quite a robust review of the implementation of consumer duty, give it about 12 months-ish to bed in. So what I'm expecting to see on this regulatory initiative grid is an early sighter of when that review may be taking place. In other words, making sure our house is well and truly in order prior to any review. And then when you get off that kind of runway, where necessary, where things impact us, you can kind of dip down into the detail, see what the initiative is. I just pulled out the consumer duty one for you there. So that's its evidence that that's happened, and they've obviously put the timeframes on it as well, which we're ticking off, aren't we? Because we're beyond now July 23, but I say it ain't over yet, because we've got July 2024 known, that's on the grid, and a review dates yet to be confirmed. Okay, so hopefully, that might just be a reference point tool that would be useful to you. And in order to show this kind of proactivity, in order to help you, frankly, do your job, and also to engage other people from a best practice point of view, what we found is, firms that actually have a visible compliance calendar actually they deal with compliance matters in quite an efficient and effective way. And it doesn't have to be kind of rocket science. It doesn't have to be pages of Excel spreadsheets. It's more of a to-do and an engagement document, really. And as you can see, it's a fairly simple template. The sort of area or task you're going to be concerned with. Just give it a brief description of when you're going to do it, and then just kind of a date or a RAG status at the end. Because there are some things that we just have to get on and do, aren't they? It's just part of life. We know we have to do our regulatory data returns to the FCA. So let's plug them into a calendar, make them visible, make it real for people. You can start to use things like the regulatory initiatives grid. You can do your own kind of external networking, training, and start to apprise people of regulatory change through the calendar. We've got a responsibility, at least on an annual basis, to go to the board or partner meetings. So let's have them in the diary. Again, I wouldn't, if I were doing the role, be candidly, leave it for a year. I'd want to be at least on a quarterly basis in at the board meetings. I would get them in the calendar as well. And then, we've got the requirements on us from the senior management certification regime. We have to do our annual fit and proper tests. And again, we can get those scheduled in so that nothing gets overlooked. As we can, the inevitable reviews we need to do of things like, our marketing activity, the templates that we use in our process reviews. And when I've worked with firms who operate on a system like this, what they describe to me is it's good because, as I say, we're always busy. There's always too much to do in the time available. And rather than everything concertinaing into one frenetic point of compliance activity, what the compliance calendar does, it enables us to plan and stagger activities through the year. So hopefully we can manage them in a better way in terms of the time commitment that we need to do and just the sheer level of effort that we need to expend to meet our regulatory requirements. And as I say, there's this other tool that's available to you as IFAC members, which I heartily recommend. So I'll talk to where you can get this at the end of the workshop. But basically, all the work's been done for you. There's a template you could draw down. And it just enables you to review where you are in terms of your compliance monitoring. So it looks at things like, supervision. So how's your record keeping? How are you going on that to your client files? What about, advice suitability? Are you demonstrating good advice through your client files? Are you hitting TCF, vulnerable customers, consumer duty, all that kind of thing? Yeah. In terms of resources, do you feel you've got adequate resources? And that's in the broadest sense, financial, human, IT, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's about looking at your systems and controls, making sure that they're best they can be in terms of overall efficiency and effectiveness. What would happen from a business continuity point of view? When's the last time you tested, if you needed to recover data? Because I know a lot of you use third-party suppliers for that. When's the last time you revisited your agreement or did a drill on business continuity? What about, your annual fit proper tests from a suitability point of view? And again, just making sure that, as the market evolves, as your business grows and evolves, does your strategy need to be revisited? What about the structure? As you grow, you might need to tweak the structure. Are there additional markets you're looking to get into? What skills are required? Yeah. So all that kind of good stuff. And as I say, all the heavy lifting's really been done for you, because you can draw down this template as part of your membership, where you've got this, the descriptors in there. It actually suggests who's going to be responsible for them, and it suggests the frequency as well. So it takes out a lot of the legwork that you would need to do in terms of thinking through how you're going to monitor your compliance activity. So I make no apologies for plugging that. I think is excellent. As I said, at that point, what I'd like to do now is just sort of broaden out, because we're coming sort of down the funnel now and saying, okay, so from an FCA perspective, yes, they do expect the SMF16 to truly own that on behalf of the firm. But from a firm perspective, they also have expectations as well. And again, as part of the leadership team in this particular role, what the FCA would expect to see, and particularly for any new applicants into this role, they're going to expect to see a conventional structure, particularly for any kind of sizable organisations. So if you haven't done already, try and get together an organogram. It's just a structure chart. It's a really good discipline. It's a really good exercise. It's a little bit harder than you think. If you've come from a corporate environment, it should be meat and drink to you. If you haven't, it's a little bit more challenging, because a good structure chart will show not just who's sitting in the role, but we'll also try and flow and map responsibilities as well. So, as an exercise, as a leadership team, it's really good for flushing out where there might be blurred edges in terms of responsibilities. And think about, the SMF regime. You really need hard edges as far as possible, because you don't want to be inadvertently held accountable for something that you don't actually believe is your responsibility. The other thing that they expect to see, and typical FCA, you'll never see this kind of written down as a specific figure, but from ongoing dialogue and our experience of working with them, they basically say a business would have a single CEO up to around about £1 million worth of turnover per annum. Yeah. Once we're starting to get north of £1 million as a turnover figure, but then as a governance and best practice point, we really need to be sort of doing some sort of separation, because one person cannot possibly wear all the different hats and give the responsibilities sufficient time. So that's where we start to think about, okay, do we need to separate out compliance, finance, ops? Do we need to bring in something like a non-executive director and or a chairman to give us some challenge around the table? And as your business grows, stakeholders also like to see that you've got that kind of rigor, structure, governance in place, whether that's clients or whether it's other shareholders. Building on that point then, so as business grows, they again would expect to see you start to peel off into different kind of committee structures. No actual rules, I stress, just guidance, just best practice. So again, when your turnover goes beyond that magic £1 million a year figure, they're kind of expecting to see a risk and compliance committee start to sit, as we've seen. And then once you get into the sort of Premier League of 20 million plus turnover, indeed, even those committees to be separated out into pure risk and pure compliance committees. But, I guess for majority of us, a combined risk and compliance committee is absolutely fine. In terms of risk committees, what will they do? And I think it's important that we look at what a committee would do, because in micro, that's what we're going to be doing actually in our role, isn't it? So basically, we're setting the risk framework. So what are the parameters what's our appetite that we want the firm to work within to? And then we're going to set the targets and objectives that we're going to work to from a compliance perspective. Yeah. And, remember, even if we're not in the space where we need formally to have a risk committee in place, we are on the hook for this. If we revisit the FCA handbook, part of their systems and controls piece, section 21.1, if you want to look it up, it basically says that all firms need to have a risk register. Yeah. Even sole practitioners need to have a risk register. Yeah. And it just defines the risk appetite for the business, as you know. Now, it needn't be war and peace. It could just be kind of one side of A4 bullet point format. That's absolutely fine, but we must have one of those in place. And of course, if you've got DFM permissions, as you know, that must have been added into your IFAC statement anyway, which has to be available generally, regardless of the size of your business. So this isn't something that's kind of new to us, is it? In terms of, again, compliance committees, but we could distill this down if we've not got the committee. Think about our reporting to the senior leadership team. This will be like a summary. What's been going on from a compliance perspective over the previous quarter, and how have we done against the key performance indicators that we've set for ourselves? And what do you use to define what good looks like, what the success measures are? Have you got a RAG status? What's the difference between a green and an amber? When would an amber go red? How well are you able to articulate those parameters? How well are you been able to monitor trends? Now, this is really, again, becoming important, even more important with consumer duty. Looking at your advice outcomes, demonstrating, real world outcomes. Remember the phrase from consumer duty? What are complaints looking like? Have we got any cause for concern there? Are we seeing any clusters in specific products or sectors? Any breaches or close calls that we need to be aware of? And it's again, it's about you for your own business, defining what you want performance to look like. So how are you measuring your performance against the targets and objectives you've set for the business? And in particular, given the importance now of the servicing piece within consumer duty, how comfortable are you from a compliance and risk perspective about clients paying a servicing fee if they're not getting an annual servicing meeting? So you might want to be looking at a baseline measure that you put in. And there's one that I've just lifted from another firm. They've said that unless they want to see at least 80% of their clients who are paying for the servicing to actually be getting an annual meeting in order to validate the costs and demonstrate their commitment to it under the consumer duty regime. So that's kind of risk and compliance. From an internal audit point of view, the SMF16 role, it's absolutely critical part of the role that you do at least an annual internal audit. And again, I know that IFAC, this is something that they will do for you. They will come in and do an audit. I would suggest that before they do that, you would want to make sure that you've dotted as many I's as you can and crossed as many T's that you can. But just good practice, good discipline is that every year you need to be doing this audit to hone in on the firm's policies. How well are the policies working? In what ways do they need to be tweaked? What about the firm's systems and processes from this, looking through your SMF16 lens? And make sure that we're including all levels within the business. Let's not fall into the trap that this is just something that's a customer facing piece and it's just a management problem. A lot of us, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support we get from our admin teams and our support. They must have a good understanding of compliance, but also the other critical regulatory pieces that we need to do. We need to demonstrate, don't we, that we're doing consumer duty, TCF, vulnerable clients, that we're achieving consistent client outcomes. So, In what way are you going to audit that and check people know and understand that? And your role as SMF16 key critical in terms of cascading of knowledge, information, training to people. And it might be that you need to do some more training because something's cropped up as a result of your audit that's highlighted a risk. Complaints, obviously, we hope we don't get complaints, but we know how importantly they are taken by the FCA. We want to try and resolve them through the rapid resolution process. In fact, our workshop last week was about complaints. But we need to know if and when a complaint happens that how we've been able to deal with that. Have we worked within the timescales? Not that the regulator set us, but have we challenged ourselves to work within shorter time frames than the regulator? What does our process look like? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Have we incurred any penalties? Have we had to pay compensation, either direct to the client because we felt we were culpable, or have we been collared by the ombudsman to give redress to a complainant? And again, anti-money laundering processes are intrinsically linked to compliance. It may well be that this is an additional hat that you wear. You may be wearing the SMF17 hat as well. But again, does your audit show who the money laundering reporting officer is, the SMF17? What happens when they're not around because they're on holiday or indisposed? What happens? Yeah. And then again, intrinsically linked to compliance is data protection and good old GDPR. So, have we had any requests for personal data? Have we been able to manage that? Have we kept our data safe and sound? Let's hope we've not breached data. It seems that the police forces are having a particularly torrid time at the moment in terms of data breaches. Not heard really anything in our space for a while, which is good. And then again, if we are on the end of any kind of hospitality or gifts, are we happy that we are record keeping is robust and we're keeping them for 5 years as we need to? And are we, you can't boil the ocean, you can't do everything all the time. Are we really focusing on what the hot topics are at the moment from an FCA perspective? Yeah. And as we know, the hottest of hot topics at the moment is consumer duty and the successful implementation of it. So I think you have a key role as the SMF16 to facilitate that for the benefit of your firm and your clients. They're still very concerned about retirement income options, and they've issued several guidance notes on this now. And as you know, they've taken some quite severe censure action. Some firms have been deauthorized as a result of some questionable retirement income planning options that they arranged. And they continue to be watchful of off-panel processes, as you know. And it is absolutely right and proper that from a compliance perspective, you continually refresh and update. And it's just to make sure that the changes that you are driving as the owner of this, that people understand them and that people are actually getting on and doing them. So, in what way have you communicated to that? Could you demonstrate that you've done that? Is that documented? Is that understood? And in what way have you checked and tested that understanding? Again, from an internal audit point of view, against more suggestions. I know not all of you choose to deal with insistent clients, and I don't blame you. Why would you? But some people do, and if you choose to do so, good luck to you. Yeah, that's absolutely fine too. But if you are dealing with an insistent client who wants to go their own way, despite your professional opinion, how robust is your process? Is there internal sign off for that? You've got to write to them. You've got to get them to come back in writing to you. What happens when? What's the audit trail? And for those of you who used, centralized investment or retirement propositions, just sense check again. suitability of the propositions and how well defined they are, what your file requirements are when you utilize these services. So quite a lot to think about from an audit perspective. As I say, I'm sure a lot of you draw on the expertise and services of IFAC to do your annual audit. Just to it's never a bad thing to have an external, objective and independent viewpoint applied to your business. Now, specifically for those of you who are coming into role, I just wanted to talk to you about what's required. I'm sure you've already gone through this with Kirsty, Alistair, or others within IFAC, but as you know, it is a requirement for the process to come on this training course. So congratulations, you're on it. That's at least one tick you can put on. And then subsequent to this, what you need to do is to go on to the BAT system, the T&C section, which I'll show you in a moment, because there's a requirement for you to jump on there and actually do an exam. Just a 15 questions, multiple choice test. You know, anybody who needs to do that test, I recommend you do that as soon as possible after this workshop while the knowledge is still fresh. Yeah, I did it myself yesterday. We've covered everything we need to cover for you to be successful there. If you've not seen it already, and I'm sure you probably have, the application to the FCA, it's a complex process, as you know, and I know a lot of you draw on the skill and expertise of IFAC to take you through that process, particularly in completion of something called the Form A, which needs to be completed fully, because if it's not, there'll be a delay. There are also, you know, copious additional information pages that need to be filled in as well. What needs to accompany your application is this statement of responsibilities that we covered on the earlier slides, you know, which is why getting that framed appropriately is critical. And don't forget, that's what they'll have on file to hold you to account to when you make your application. They'll also, if you're coming new to role, want to see your CV, which documents your working history. And again, just think back to the information I've shared with you about their view in terms of some of the key knowledge, skills and experience somebody would need to demonstrate to be successful in this role. So try and ensure that you've covered all those bases in your CV. And then once again, the reason I mentioned the organisational chart is that they would expect to see some sort of organisational chart. Needn't be you know, overly complex, but basically showing clear lines of reporting, yeah, and clear lines of responsibility. So the FCA can look at that and go, aha, got it. SMF16 responsible for this, others responsible for that. Yeah, this is how the business works. This is what the reporting lines are. And then they would expect to see some sort of induction program that's specific to you as the individual coming to role. So within that induction program, from a best practice point of view, you should have done some sort of gap analysis. So what are the skills, knowledge and experience you need to do the job? What's your current level? Yeah. And there's some sort of plan put in place to induct you into the business slash role. Yeah. Now the FCA are realists. They realise that, you know, not everybody can come into a role ready baked, so to speak. So, you know, they do expect that to see an induction slash development plan in place to further develop the skills and knowledge that you've got. And then the induction program should seamlessly morph into an ongoing learning and development plan, your continuing professional development, again, which is specific to you. So beyond your initial induction, this is what my kind of initial 12 months, say, learning and development plan looks like. Provide them a copy of that with your training needs analysis and what you intend to do in terms of your personal development plan. Okay, good stuff. So we set out this morning to cover quite a lot of ground. I know that. Let's just have a look, make sure that we've done that. So I said I'd start the session just by kind of revisiting the senior managers regime, the expectations from within that, specifically for the SMF16 role, and the importance that the SMF16 role that is placed by the FCA on that SMF16 role. You know, it's a mandatory requirement. What we've then done is tried to, again, just get on the same page in terms of these are the key elements of the role. It's important we know what we're signing up to, because we need to frame a statement of responsibilities, because we've got a duty of care, a duty of accountability that we are signing up to. And then we looked at sort of various ways that we could try and manage our responsibilities. The concept of something like a compliance calendar, maybe to smooth out some of the workflow. We looked at something like the compliance monitoring program that's available from IFAC, again, just to checking and testing that we're on the right lines. Then we broaden that out into, you know, what the expectations of the FCA are around some of the business structures and governance. Once our turnover goes north of $1 million, and what that meant from a risk and compliance point of view. But what we did is we said, okay, bigger firms need these specific committees, but there's some lessons that we can actually learn just as an individual enrolled from the discipline that these committees actually bring to larger businesses. And then we took a look at the kind of the overarching internal audit requirements that you are responsible for, at least on an annual basis, given the importance of the regulatory regime and compliance with it. You've probably got your own thoughts on what internal compliance needs to look like, but then flag the fact that it's good to have an external perspective other than the FCA, may I say. So, and that's something that IFAC, as you know, can help you with. And then for the people coming into role, just had a brief look at what needs to happen before you get the magic sign-off from the FCA as being authorised to be able to do the role. I don't think it hurts for those of us who are currently enrolled to say, okay, if I, for whatever reason, had to apply for the SMF16 role next week, what sort of shape would I be in? Looking at that criteria, what would my CV say? What would my statement of responsibilities? Would they stand the scrutiny of the FCA? So I said that I would just share with you before we finally close where to access some of this information. So if you just go into to the BAT system as normal, if you look under the documents section, there are a couple of places to go there. Firstly, there is a compliance manual that is really good. I had a look at it yesterday. It's kind of A to Z, everything you want to know about compliance. It's a really good read, again, for either refresher or new to role. And it's got some good insight, written in plain English and distilled down. So very good. And then there's that compliance monitoring program that I just overviewed briefly on the session today. Again, a chance for you to dip into that. You can draw down the template, either use it as is or tweak it and amend it, work it into your compliance calendar, do what you will with it. But I guess the message is you're not starting with a blank piece of paper. There is support resources available to you. And for those of you who need to do the exam, just need to go into the T&C section underneath financial exams. You'll see that exam there. It's showing on the slide, the SM and CR exam 23. And as I say, 15 multiple choice questions. We've definitely covered everything that you need to cover to be successful in that exam. So jump on and do that. As you know, these days, due to the wonders of technology, IFAC, through the BAT system, actually make training certificates automatically available to you as IFAC members. I think there's a couple of fields that you need to fill in, but you should all be a fay now with how to generate automatically your certificate for continuing professional development, because having taken the time and trouble to come on, you must evidence that you've done that. So that's good from a regulatory and best practice point of view. So there we have it. That's all we were going to cover this morning. I hope you found that useful and informative. Good to be working with you again this week. Please have a very enjoyable rest of the day and weekend. And I look forward to catching up with you later this month when we take a look at the SMF3 role. That's the one I'll be running. So for now, I wish you all a very pleasant day and a very good morning. So goodbye for now.